Okay, so I would like to welcome our speaker today. Clark Harshbarger is the Director of Stewardship for Mad Agriculture, and he'll be kind of talking about how to make regenerative agriculture a little bit more personal and what individual people can do to help holistically manage their farm. So Clark, if you want to take it away.
Sure, sounds good. Thanks, Josie. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining in with us. 350 Colorado reached out to me a little over a month ago and asked me if I had, or would be willing to take this opportunity to share some of the work that I do with Mad Agriculture. And so tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about how we work with farmers and producers and how they engage with a framework of change. And so before we get started, Josie, can I share my screen?
Yes. Oh, do you not have access? I can give you access.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm talking to you guys all from Longmont, Colorado tonight. I'm not sure how wide the audience is on here, but today we had our first little, well, it was a nice little rain shower. It was almost our first rain in September. So it was a really, it's the second to the last day. So it was pretty eye-opening of what's going on in the state of precipitation and rain and everything that it takes to actually drive some of the processes I'm going to be sharing with you all tonight. So yeah, so can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Okay, so I'm going to scroll through like a slide deck, and we'll, like I said, save some questions for the end. But something that we've learned from our partners at Quivera, they're another land a group that works with land and works with people and community down in New Mexico, are working on the practice of land acknowledgement. And so tonight, like I said, I'm speaking from Longmont, Colorado, and the lands here were historically occupied by Apache and maybe even Ute and Shoshone and some of the foothills, and then in other places around the big state of Colorado are the Denai, Comanche, Cheyenne, Pawnee, and of course the Pueblo tribes. And so, yeah, I just wanted to recognize that there were communities here, there were people here that were engaging in these land bases, engaging in these resources much longer before the United States and our civilization. And there's a lot of wisdom we can glean and look back towards to help us move forward. And 350 Colorado gave me this opportunity, and I was kind of like, well, who am I going to be talking to? And where have you guys been on your journey with this webinar series? And so they were talking about these big scales of like whole world views and regional views, and they'd asked me to talk about kind of the personal view. They sent me the webinar of the previous speaker. Her name was Ade Romero Briones, and it was the most powerful webinar I've seen in a long time. And it taught us a lot, and it taught myself a lot about continuing to try to unlearn some of the language that we've been bought to sold. I myself went to a land-grant university, and land-grant universities have done amazing work in agriculture, but they've also been partners of some of the agriculture that's been very destructive to our resources and to our communities, and a lot of different history there. And so she helps us use language to understand some of the ideas that we're coming up with and how we actually use our own words to describe maybe other people's ideas or ideas that have been long and proven. So I just wanted to acknowledge that that webinar is great. And if you could put that in the chat for everyone, Josie, I just think it would be a really nice thing if you hadn't had a chance to see the last webinar. So yeah, so where we're at today, just jump right in. I work for Mad Agriculture. Like I said, my name's Clark Harshbarger. My title is Director of Stewardship. Mad Agriculture was founded by Phil Taylor and his wife, Nicole Brinks Taylor. And this is our team. We've recently added 2 more individuals that aren't shown here. You can see them on our website, Elizabeth Candelario and Alex Heelman. They actually are heading up kind of our supply and demand and our markets division within what Mad Agriculture is. Rebecca and I, you can see her pictured on the far right, work in the stewardship realm. Brandon and Jared work in the Capitol, and Jane is our director of marketing. She helps make these hats. They're called medicine hats, and she publishes our journal quarterly. It's amazing. You can get free copies electronically, or if you want to go online, there's a small cost, I think, and she can ship you one. But that's what Jane does. She kind of helps us tell our story of mad agriculture. So let me just see if I can move this to the side so I can see my whole deck here. Yeah, so what we're talking about a little bit with mad agriculture is just trying to reimagine our relationship with our society, with our communities, and of course with our agricultural practices and our resources and things that we're really truly a part of. Let's see here. Got a pin stuck on there. Should be able to talk through here. Somehow I got my chat. There we go. So who do we work with? We're working with mid-sized farmers to larger scale, typically organic farmers or farmers that have the intention of transitioning to organic. And we're really pushing the idea of helping farmers move to a newer certification called Regenerative Organic certification that's coming more and more prominent in agricultural annual cropland type soils. And so that's something that we're exploring, and how to actually communicate some of our message to our end users, which is the consumer, people that are supporting agriculture through their behavior. And so you have an old story and a new story. Mad agriculture, this is kind of Phil's philosophy that a lot of us have bought into or really believe in. And it's really trying to take these new approaches to how we see the world, and the old story versus the new. And you hear a lot about trying to redefine what the word, or actually define the word of regenerative agriculture. The last definition I saw came from Whole Foods, which I thought was really quite interesting. Of all people, Whole Foods is telling us what regenerative agriculture is. Well, they sell a lot of amazing foods. That's good, I guess. But really, the way I've seen it, and I learned this from my friend, he was an Apache Mexican American man down from South Texas, his Ray Salazar. And he told me he was a seed keeper for his Apache people, and he grew food, and he was a caretaker of food. And he told me that in his mind, the way he sees it is that his people always gave more than they take. And I think with regenerative agriculture, if we can think about it in a way where we give more than we take to the resources, to the land, we give more than we take, to our communities, we give more than we take, maybe we listen more than we speak, those types of balances. I think that's a really simple way to define it in my mind. And it's for each person to kind of handle how they want to better understand what regenerative agriculture is. But I really believe just saying that it's something that we're in the practice of trying to give more than we take, I think is a really simple way, and kids can understand that, adults can understand that. And it's something that I find a lot of peace with. So this came out of Vermont, the 8 forms of capital. I think it was in a publication, in a magazine that Ethan Solovyov was published in. But it talks about the 8 forms of capital. And even as mad agriculture, we're exploring going from a nonprofit to a for-profit business. We're like, whoa, if we can just make the farmer's bottom line profitable, then we're going to have a business viable for us. And we have to really be careful and catch ourselves that we listen to the farmers and the stewards and the ones that are undergoing a lot of these challenges with the changing climate, evolving global markets, and really listening to the way they see forms of capital. And so there's these 8 forms, and a lot of them tonight, experiential capital, maybe a little social capital. Sometimes we'll read poetry with mad agriculture. We have community events that can help with that. But like living capital, for example, let's see, as here is the butterfly, the monarch. I spent about 2 decades studying soil science. I was trained, like I said, in a land-grant university, and mapped soils from Montana to Texas, from California, all through the Appalachian Mountains, in the foothills of Ohio, and really all over the country. And during that journey, I saw a lot of degraded lands. I saw a lot of really amazing agriculture, beautiful things happening, but I also saw a lot of sickness. And so I felt like I had to, at one point, kind of a midlife, crisis, what you want to call it. I had to go back to the land myself. So I left my job at the government, and I went and worked on a farm for the last 2.5 years in a grass-fed type situation where we were raising livestock, and really did a lot of personal introspection and self-work and self-healing. And I've written some pieces about it in our Mad Agriculture journal. They're just like little one-page essays, but it was a really important time for me because it was like time for me to quit being a talker and become a doer. So I was working, 500-600 days in a row, raising the livestock. I would have a little downtime on Wednesdays. Our day off was like basically going to a farmer's market and serving customers for 8 to 10 hours. But it really helped me understand the depth of this journey and what we're asking people that are engaged in a land-based business. And so with Mad Agriculture, we really try to have compassion for that and try to have compassion to our stewards that we're engaging with. One way we did that is we came up with this Perennial Fund. And the Perennial Fund was a matching grant through the NRCS USDA. It's called a Conservation Innovation Grant. And we came up with a certain amount of money and they matched it. And then we were able to redistribute that money out to producers that are wanting to transition land over a long period. And so we come to them as not just almost like a banker, but we actually provide technical assistance and understanding of their systems approach. And then we also can help them land their products in premium markets. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that philosophy, but a little bit more just about myself. Again, the indigenous wisdom of the past, I think, is our compass for a lot of this work. The One Straw Revolution was introduced to me by my same friend Ray I was telling you all about. And then, of course, Alan Savory's work with holistic management. Both of these I was exposed to, in the 90s and early 2000s, this publication and the literature. And it literally, I went to Asia with holistic management. I took a whole semester in college with it, studied it for years and years and years. And it literally took me probably 15 years to learn how to practice it. So it is a lifelong endeavor of really how to think in wholes. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to steer away from trying to deal with complicated versus complexity. And that's a big part. And then Daniela Meadows and Carol Sanford were using a lot of their wisdom for frameworks to help us understand how to empower our clients and the producers and the stewards that we're working with. We don't want to put words in their mouth. We really want their ideas and their expression of self to come out in their lands and in their businesses. So these two women have really helped us understand how to think in systems and how to think in using frameworks. The Agrarians has also been another really powerful way to see systems, of course, from the permaculture to Darren Doherty's work, and then the way Mad Agriculture sees it. I'll keep kind of diving into that. So this is what we're calling our framework of change. Even just recently, I've been kind of arguing to myself, should the steward actually be in the middle, and maybe the land, or should that be the land or the animal or the resources? And I think for this talk, it's really important to really ask that question. And you guys ask that question of us. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the end, like the egocentric, if we don't have humans out on the lands and they're just barren, we know what happens to them. They desertify. We've seen it in our national parks. We've seen it in a lot of our national forests and big landscapes that we've either over preserved or mismanaged. We've had some really devastating consequences. So land does need impact, and it does need, it does need natural processes to be stewarded, at least at the scale of population that we're at now on planet Earth. And so anyways, we'll start with the steward in the middle. And it's really a powerful journey to really ask some questions of the steward and put them kind of in a place where they haven't necessarily seen their land or their business before. It's almost like therapy or counseling, some of the work that we're doing. And tears are shed a lot of times, and conversations are had with aunts and uncles or grandparents and granddaughters and grandsons that had never been had before. And so it's really about getting the vision of if we're successful, what does that all look like together? And what is the business that we're actually going to use to be successful together? And really trying to help understand what that looks like in those different forms of capital that I showed, but also using financial relationships with their customers, with their banks, with conservation agencies like the NRCS or state agencies to try to flow money in from all different angles. And that's part of that outer circle of the regenerative culture, where we've reinvented new forms of capital. We really try to access premium markets. And then we try to tell that all through story. And the story kind of interweaves from the steward to the land and the animals and the plants that we raise, and into our culture, into our, I'm not very good with this tonight. And so talks a little bit about the steward, and then our decision makers. The decision makers is really tricky. Sometimes decision makers are looked at as someone that actually just signs the check. But a lot of farms and ranches are made up of teams of people. And sometimes the ranch manager or the caretaker, as I like to call them, they'll actually be making a lot of decisions on when to move cattle, when to move sheep. Sometimes croppers, people that are raising annual crops have people that actually plant or harvest for them. And sometimes those calendars get decided. So it's really important for a business to actually identify the key decision makers. And really, when I say that, it's people that actually have veto power within the business. And that's really going to be important as we go forward to really understand, who is actually a decision maker in your team, and versus who is part of your resources. And then what money do you actually need, or forms of capital do you need to be successful, to live a quality of life that you define? And a lot of that comes directly from Alan Savory's work, like I said, that I've been practicing for quite some time. So we talk about the money that's available. How much do we need? How much do we need to run a business? Are there short-term returns on investments versus long-terms? Here you see on the right was a flock of sheep I was raising, and I would call it the tennis court method. And we would move the sheep every 2 days to try to outrun fecal parasites and whatnot, and then make sure that all of the ewes and the wethers and the lambs and whatnot had fresh forage. So we had exterior perimeters, and then I would cut in the middle like a tennis court net, and I would make 3 of those within a paddock. So again, that's just an example of the type of work that it takes to be in regenerative practice. It was constant motion at all times. And so as a soil scientist, it's really important. Regenerative agriculture is, of course, much more than just regenerating our soils. It's regenerating our communities. It's regenerating our relationships with our land. It's very importantly, and I think probably the most important point of this presentation, it's actually regenerating the relationship we have with ourselves. And a lot of times we used to say, what does this land want to be? And is it a prairie, or is it a forest? Is it a wetland? Does it want to be agricultural land? And I think it was really important for us to kind of find that insight. But more importantly is, what does this land need myself to become in order to actually steward it in a regenerative method? And so helping to understand your soil is a really great place to start with that. Healthy soils, it's like that classic thing they said in Congress years ago. I mean, once you see one and see what a healthy soil looks like, it doesn't take a lot to understand it. Like little children and people that are a novice in soils can quickly deduce if a soil is healthy and functioning by just looking at this list on the left I have there. It's soft to the touch. You can work your hands in it. It typically gets dark to lighter over depth. There's all kinds of shapes and sizes of the roots that are in a soil. Those create the interterrestrial pores and a lot of oxygen and other gases like carbon dioxide and nitrogen, and all those things have a lot of room to fluctuate. Of course, smells really good. There's actually signs of visible life. And soils will go through different phases as they wet and dry, and understanding the season of winter and spring and fall. So it's really important that you look at your soil seasonally so you can understand what that change actually looks like in your soil, so you can understand some of your management. There's, of course, a plethora of ways to spend money and test, and all of that is really important. If you've got a big decision to make that's going to cost thousands of dollars in seed cost or fertilizer cost, or whether you destock or stock animals. So it is important to do some tests on tissue, and every once in a while do some soil health tests or mineralogy tests. but generally speaking, you can tell if the soil is thriving by just looking at the list on the left there. So, you know, these are just parts of the scales of permanence, our infrastructure, things that we can't change, like our climate, versus if you follow that around in a clockwise formation to the soil, that's actually something we can impact by our management. So we have that on there. And then of course, our regenerative markets. I talked a little bit about trying to get premiums for our crops. If we are working to move those sheep every day, or we're actually managing our cover crops throughout the winter versus just going into fallow, there should be premiums that are received by these stewards in the markets, and we have to better understand how to support those through our branding. A lot of times you go to a farmer's market or to a local market, you can shake the hand of the farmer, get to know, go on a farm tour, but a lot of other foods that we like to partake in, like coffee or foods grown in other regions of the world, we may never get to meet those farmers or go to those landscapes. So it's really nice to have a brand that we can trust on those. And brands can be very confusing, I get that, but we really feel like that's the best way for consumers to help live their values in the marketplace. So we're still all trying to work together to find out how to tell the best truth out on the land. And of course, storytelling, I'll mention again our Mad Agriculture journals. It's an amazing experience. We have open collaboration with different photographers and different storytellers, and all different types of things, from like seed catalogs and heritage wheat, different stories from farmers and how they've regenerated land and their spirits from doing some of this work. So I highly encourage you guys to check that out. So yeah, one of the things that we're, I don't know if we're struggling with it, but one of the services that we're thinking about trying to provide are these regenerative farm plans. Really what we found with a farm plan is it's like anything. If it's too long, it sits on the shelf, or if there's no money to actually activate the plan, or if there's not enough labor force, you can really come up to some weak links or barriers to help actually implement the plans. So we've really tried to move our model around to actually insert money in the beginning. A lot of times with the federal government, for instance, they have to show up and then do a plan, and if the plan gets approved or ranked, then they get a cost share. So what we're really trying to do to accelerate regenerative ag is to show up with some type of grant or some type of capital, maybe in a form of a loan, and to really move that right into the farm so we can incentivize change much quicker and adaptation. And then we kind of plan through a process that is kind of flowing. And again, this is kind of like the soil health slide. We can never forget this is how the system is working, through the sun energy that has to get captured by plants. The plants are the only things on the earth that can do that. Then it has to go through the decomposers and our mineral cycles, and of course then our herbivores and ourselves, which are herbivores and carnivores. But I think this slide is really important. Again, it's just an ecological process slide, but it talks a little bit about the fluidity of trying to understand and manage complexity. This is from Savory's, and it talks about our tools that we have. You can substitute money or labor. I can do it myself, or I can pay someone to do it, but those tools kind of come back. And what makes us really unique with some of the other primates, and there's quite a few mammals that use creativity, obviously in nature, but our human creativity is a really powerful tool that we have and can share with each other in our farming systems. And of course, we have fire, which is our oldest tool. Technology, which is our most relied upon tool, rest, which is our most misunderstood tool. And then we have these living organisms that we can manage, such as livestock, creating pollinator habitat, whatnot, plants, and it's using the impact of animals as a herd, using their dung and their actual, when they're touching shoulder to shoulder because of the prey-predator relationship, then the actual impact of grazing. And so those are just some of the things that we like to help producers understand. Most of crop farming is really in the tool of technology. So that obviously can get very broad, from using sprayers to no-till drills, to tractors, to everything that it takes to clean seeds and everything to get them into a mill, to get them, milled down and into a bag of flour, which has been amazing. Mad Agriculture took a big tour this summer, and we went over all of our farmers that we're lending money to through the Perennial Fund. And there was a producer that grows grain harvests the grain, takes it over to his seed cleaners, clean all the seed, then they mill it and bag it and go directly to consumer, fully vertically integrated. And I was just blown away by the amount of work, B, the amount of thought that had to go into how to pay for all of that, how to have different teams all working together to synergize. And I think that's what's really important about holistic management, is that drawing everything out and connecting all the relationships, which I'll talk a little bit about later in our mind mapping tool, is really important. But we still need to have tasks and understand that there's something I can do right now that's going to have the most marginal impact on my business and on my quality of life and on how I spend my time today. And so identifying that and knowing that it's just a bigger part of the whole, and that each of those little tasks all end up feeding into a vision together that your team, your decision makers, has decided together. So when you have these tasks and you're working independently, they all can be focused and turned back to this greater vision. And that's why I think the holistic context and setting that out in your business is so critical, because it gives everyone that's involved and has their life and the quality of their life dependent on the success of the business, they have inputs into what that vision or essence is. So it makes it really, really nice to have a beacon, a North Star, so to speak. Nicole Masters is someone else that's doing a lot of this work that I've been really impressed and excited to learn from. I spent a couple days with her last month, I think in August, at the James Ranch in the western slope of Colorado in the Animas Valley. And she has her frameworks that she uses and is doing some really great work. I came up with these 5 T's when I was working for the NRCS as a soil scientist, but they're all just kind of ways to help farmers understanding paradigm shifts, how to see themselves and see the world and the land and the resources that they're managing, maybe in some different lights. And so again, frameworks are really critical to really have a new experience and something. I say a lot of times it's like when you walk into a home and you see a crack on the wall. The people living in that home, that crack has been in the wall for maybe 20, 30 years. And the crack gives the wall character. It gives the wall uniqueness, but it also could be letting water in, or it could be allowing a place for termites to come in. And so when you have a new set of eyes, look on a land base and look at a business with a group of teams or farmers, and you have people looking at all different angles, so all the blind spots are covered through money, through markets, and through ecology, it really we've found it to be a valuable service. So a lot of times just having a different perspective on your land can really help producers and farmers move into a regenerative space that they hadn't been able to achieve alone. Really kind of messy. So I'm not going to get into organic matter. There's a slide on it real quickly. If we can share the deck, maybe you can look a little bit about it, but there's an old story with organic matter, and then this kind of a new story about the life in our soils and managing our underground livestock. And that's something you hear quite a bit in the soil health world and in some of this movement. So kind of a neat slide. So you have the napkin farm plan. That's a farm plan that you can sit down with someone and probably do in a 1-hour session or a 1-hour call. And it's really important. It kind of helps understand, kind of the big pictures. And then of course you can take that further. This is the farm I worked at in Ohio. It was about 600 acres of arable and tillable and pasture land. Had like a 75-acre wetland, which you see it right in the heart of the farm. And then it had about 400 or 500 acres of timber that we used to forage and then raise some of our hogs in. But you can see the 2 different levels of farm planning that it can go. And the big kicker is infrastructure. Where are the roads? Where are the water points? And then having an empty canvas to start on and saying, if I could put them anywhere, where would I put them? Where would I put the road? Where would I put the water points? And then matching with your existing infrastructure with infrastructure you want to invest capital in. And that is why it's really nice to use land planning. This here is a mind map I made. Again, you can chicken scratch them and kind of write them out as fast as you can just to brainstorm with them. Or you can use kind of some different softwares. This is called MindMeister. And this is really nice. We started right here in the middle with Flint Ridge as the land base. And then we tried to connect everything around that land base that actually makes the business and the land harmonize together. And then with this, the reason I really like it is because then you can find weak link in some of the relationships and really target your energy and target your most important resources to trying to build those relationships to strengthen your overall model, whether it's your business model, your ecological model you're trying to implement in your system, or maybe even with the community, with your team, and with the labor that it goes into supporting a farm business. So again, I'm a huge fan of mind maps. My team gets kind of sick of me using them, but they're just so helpful to me. It's kind of how my head works. So part of it is my personal preference. Again, and then this is just another way to look at your strength, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. It's another framework. It's just a really powerful way. And you can do that with a land base here. You can do it with all the scales of permanence. You can say, what are the strengths and the weaknesses and opportunities and threats of my climate, my landforms, my water, and so forth and so on, and really try to understand, how to use your weaknesses as your strengths. And sometimes, your land's wet. We get a lot of farmers that want to tile their land, especially in the upper Midwest, Minnesota, where I'm from in Ohio, because it instantly increases the value of the land in the marketplace. But we really question a lot of that sometimes, or have them maybe ask the question, is there a wetland credit or a wetland bank that if we enhance this land, increase the amount of wetland, maybe there's an enterprise or a type of funding that can actually pay you for stewarding the wetland versus farming the wetland. And that's just one example of turning something that might have been a weakness into a form of capital or strength to actually provide a deeper healing to the landscape that you're stewarding. So again, that's another example of doing one on our farmers markets, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Gantt charts is a way to kind of work through how to do the timing. These are all practice codes that the NRSS uses for different things that you can do to make a system. Knowing how much grass you have out there. So this is a framework we use to monitor how much grass an animal is going to need for a whole life cycle or through a whole season of growing season. And we do it again for the non-growing season. And this is what it would look like on a map. And those would be daily moves for a beef herd. Yeah, so these are just some minerals. The minerals is really interesting. If you're into soil mineralogy, Dan Kittredge and all of the Acres USA folks, Zimmerman, and there's a bunch of them. Anderson is another one, but Kesey, I think, has a book on a lot of that stuff. So this is kind of a compilation of some of that training I've taken and kind of just benchmark numbers of some soil minerals that we try to look for in our whatnot. So with that, I guess I'm gonna kind of stop sharing my screen here if I can figure that how to get that into the Word, and really just want to take some time. I kind of speak fast, and so take some time to maybe dive into some of the slides that we saw, open it up for questions. I haven't been monitoring the chat. I was just kind of in free flow there. I can look in the chat to see, people have suggestions, of course, like we didn't get into business planning. We have all that in our services. We do actually something that we're doing now is we do conventional, organic, and then regenerative, and we take all of the different costs for enterprises, and whether it be overhead, debt service, the cost of seeds, and we compare that for the 3 different systems so farmers can see if we can reduce our tillage, if we can graze our cover crops, if we can use cover crops as an actual whole season growing, how do you distribute some of those losses? So we're very into the economics of it. This was more about learning about how to use these tools of making a holistic context, defining in that context who your decision makers are, using mind maps to understand all the different complex relationships, using your SWOT models to try to understand where your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are. And then some of those last tools I showed you were grazing charts, Gantt charts for cover crop seeding, and a lot of technical stuff that I've learned over, like I said, 20 years working for the USDA as a soil scientist, and then the last couple of 3 years as a practitioner. So yeah, I guess we'll just open it up for questions. Let's see here. Winnipeg, surprisingly, we haven't had frost in the city. That's funny. Thank you for sharing the webinar on regeneration of love. I love that. I was going to talk a little bit today about like caring, and how caring is like part of love, and like maybe it's separate. And I was like kind of even struggling for the language. That's why I didn't mention it, but someone put that on the chat, and I 100% agree. We have to, that's one thing I found out about the farm, why farms are so complicated on the social aspects, is the work is so deeply challenging in every sense of the word, that you really generally have to love the people in a deep way that you're actually serving with. And I think that's why the model, of course, of the family farm, some of the new stuff that's coming out of the East Coast from Chris Newman about these communal farms where everyone owns a share of each enterprise. And I think those are beautiful. And I agree with and all different solutions. But I think that's what made the family farm so special, was that there was an inherent dysfunctionality, but there was also a lot of genuine love and unconditional love for the place, where they were raised, and those kind of things. So I love the fact that someone put that in the chat. So yeah, Josie, how do you want to try to handle the question and answer session?
So usually what we do is we have Jordan, she's our intern. She'll read the questions out of the chat, kind of in the order that they come.
Cool.
So if anyone wants to ask their own question, also you can put an asterisk and we can just call on you and you can talk directly. So yeah, just start sending in the chat if you have anything. It looks like we have a question from Rebecca Wood. Do you have any data collection templates that you use or could share?
Yeah, so like open source is really important to us. Nicole Masters shared one with us. I'm gonna have to, it'll be in my to-do, like I guess if there's a listserv, but there are some open source platforms that are being used to collect regenerative agriculture. And Nicole was really pushing one that sounded like it was one that I would support. So I'll get back to you guys on that. I don't remember the name of it. I'll just be frank with you. Data science, super great. Soil scientist for 20 years. But, and Phil has helped me with this. Phil's a doctor of ecology and studied carbon and whatnot. But like when I went back to the farm, I literally intentionally tried to kill the scientist inside of me, so I could just understand how to be without trying to measure everything. And I would think about butterfly concentrations, how close my manure patties were together, how fast my grass would grow, when it would seed. And so there's all these things that come with data that we could be collecting that inherently are just being seen by the stewards. So I really feel like it's empowering to show and to teach people what to look for in a healthy, regenerative, ecological landscape. Is kind of the empowerment that inherently more and more humans will kind of gain a perspective of what healthy landscapes can look like and how to actually be compensated for doing that. Data is important, but it's a hat that I don't wear in the organization. My colleague Rebecca has been excellent at doing some of that. So anyways, it's kind of a soapbox a little bit about it. It's super important, but I also think it's just part of the story.
It looks like Brooke has a question. I live in Longmont and was wondering if there's a way to get in touch with you here.
Yeah, so that's been a challenge for Mad Agriculture as we've moved from a nonprofit into a for-profit business. We're just wrapping up our nonprofit calendar year, so get a hold of me sooner than later. And I can help you. And if you want to pay for service, we're really trying to move into larger landscapes to try to help climate at a faster scale, even though we know every acre needs to be regenerated and every acre counts, and it doesn't matter how small or big you are. It just, we felt like our best model for success to pay for a team of 10 or 12 people was to kind of use the scale of economy. But if you're local, Brooke, just shoot me an email and I'd love to give you an hour talk and maybe see if I can connect you with some of our other network and people in this space in the Front Range communities.
Heather's asking if, how can we find experienced farm mentors as new farmers ourselves? Yeah,
that's great. So our good partners at Quivera have a apprentice program. They have applications. Of course, Joel Salatin, right or wrong, has taken a big hit for having free labor for the last 20 years. And so he has an internship where you can go work at Polyface. I think he has over 500 applicants every season for like maybe 10 or 15 positions. So there's hundreds of farms that are in those models where you can come and serve as a laborer for the summer. I currently am not like actively keeping a list, but the Stockman Grassman Farmer is a grass-fed beef, grass-fed livestock magazine, and they'll have classifieds that match farmers with labor or apprentice or internship opportunities. That's one for sure. The Young Farmers Coalition here in Boulder, it's called the Flatirons. I can't remember what the last part is, but Andy Breiter is a close friend of mine. We just interviewed him for a movie we're making yesterday about Restore Colorado, which is a program we run to try to get our food waste and get some of that paid for to redistribute money to farmers to allow them to have extra capital to engage in regenerative practices. And so the long and the short of, he's the president of the Young Farmers Coalition Flatiron chapter. So he'd be a really great resource to get a hold of and to help try to find opportunities. There is no shortage. Another farm we work on, which is a BIPOC farm or work with, they're down in Denver. They're called Frontline Farming. They have a volunteer day almost every Saturday. You can go to their website and they have a list of about 10 slots. And once they fill up, then that volunteer opportunity is full and you can go help them seed. You can spread compost, do all kinds of great labor work and get your hands into the earth. So those are just there's a lot out there. You just have to be a little curious.
Do you know if there's any, do you know of any farms that are connected with the WOOF organization that do regenerative farming?
Oh yeah, WOOF has been super, super good. I have a good friend in Ohio. Her name is Amy, and she runs like a hip camping farm, but she, has used woofers as her sole source of labor. She provides room, she provides food, and then you in turn, provide labor and help in those practices. And she's doing a tremendous job healing her land. And she's a smaller farmer, about 30 acres. But the WOOF, I don't know how they're organized. Very familiar with it, know a lot of people that have utilized it, and that, Jordan, is a great call out. Yeah,
cool.
So for
Good
those
to
of you
know.
interested, look up that program.
Just for anyone who doesn't know, that stands for Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. So just to clarify.
So when we went on our road trip this summer, we had lots of like $1 million ideas. Like we have Landcoin instead of Bitcoin and all these things that are of course already happening. But one of our ideas was my wife, when we were, first starting our relationship, she worked for AmeriCorps, and, they would volunteer at the Red Cross, and there used to be these conservation corps. I'm like, man, we need a farm corps where we actually pay young Americans or any American that has a back and feet and is willing to help, or anyone that can do computer work to help farmers and actually pay them to actually go help regenerate our societies and our lands. And having AmeriCorps like steward that as one of their opportunities, I just need to talk to them. But I think it would be a beautiful way to do those last couple conversations that we had to help increase the amount of opportunity for kids, and help them pay for tuition, give them a small stipend, and then get them working on the land and doing this work. We need more doers. It's something I'm doing next week. I'm taking the week off to go harvest potatoes for an organic farm in the San Luis Valley. Because they needed help. And a lot of times that's the thing when we work with farmers, you can't just say, oh, let's dream together. Sometimes you have to show up, and like we built a poop deck down in Louisiana so they could put their porta potty out of a flood zone. And sometimes you have to get in there and get your hand dirty, stay for a week, move the cows, tag the calves, whatever needs done. And then you can move in to some of these higher states of energy levels, what we call the regenerative states. You have to move them from vital energy out of automatic energy into from sustainable energy into regenerative energy or sensitive energy. And so you have to recognize that dreaming is important, but sometimes getting done what needs to be done that day has to be addressed before we can get into some of the internal work. And so I just wanted to say that because I had left it out. It's a framework that we use, recognizing our energy states.
Great thing to keep in mind. I like that, doing more than talking, especially right in the world right now. Need to get back out there. Okay, another question. It looks like, do you know anyone in Australia, or do you have any connections here that are doing regenerative farming? Yeah.
That's a good question. I mean, Colorado, Brendan Rocky was kind of the most famous land steward in the San Luis Valley for growing his finger potatoes and using intercropping and using less water. And so we've brought him into the Front Range community to talk about some of his ideas. And again, he uses a lot of interconnectedness in the way he thinks, but he's certainly someone you could look up some of his work. The Savory Institute is here in the Front Range. I showed the slide of Alan's work. Daniela is the CEO of there, and she's been a mentor of mine. I've learned so much about how to work with people and how to work on myself from some of their teaching. They have a hub in the West Bijou Ranch in like Adams, Arapahoe County, just east of the Denver airport. So they're certainly regeneratively managing their livestock on their shortgrass prairie. And then there's several farmers that are locally in the Longmont area, Macaulay Farms, Sky Pilot, Tree Fort has a collectivized of a group of farmers doing neat stuff. Alice and Carl at the Golden Hoof. There's some farms in Kiowa County that are doing work with the Audubon Society that are just doing amazing work. Oh gosh, there's a lot of amazing things happening. The list is long. We want it to be endless, and hopefully we'll get there. But yeah, there's some great stuff happening.
Derek says, we own an acreage and are preparing to take about 3 acres from conventional crop ag to personal production, looking at implementing some permaculture principles to start with personal fruit and vegetable production, then possibly growing into small commercial. What suggestions would you have for getting started?
Yeah, it's kind of like, where are you trying to end up? So with those small farms, it's how many apples are you gonna need to sell to pay for your truck, your electricity, your mortgage. So it's basically like, is there a market waiting for you with all of those things that you're trying to describe? And when you lay out a business plan, you need to put it on pillars, and the ones that you're really, really good at right now that you can make money on this season. Maybe the second pillar is the one that you've done before, but you need to scale up for it to be economically sustainable. And the third one might be something that you haven't tried your hand at and that you want to do some smaller farm scale trials on, like growing heritage wheat or raising pigs in the woods, for instance. Not an easy thing to do, by the way. So that's what I would recommend. Make sure that there's a business there to those things that you're describing, and you have the scale and the land to be able to do it. If it's just a hobby farm, then go for it. You're going to pay your own bills through other off-farm incomes and whatnot. If it's going to be how you make a livelihood, you have to make sure you have the scale to meet your bottom lines, and you need to know that number, and you need to know what it's going to take to produce that enterprise line by line. And that said, labor, especially in livestock industry, cannot be accounted for in one-to-one correlation with time. It just doesn't mathematically work out. And that's part of the ROC certification we're working on, is how do you humanely get field workers to work a fair, honest wage and still be able to produce the crop to make it economically feasible for both the labor and for the business. Those models are going to need rethought and supported by taxpayers, supported by brands, and then supported by, I think, as Jordan and I were kind of alluding to, just more people participating in the field of agriculture.
It looks like Mary, did you have a question about local currencies to support local farms? Maybe let's move to the next one. She can rewrite that if she wants to. Could you provide internship experiences for high school or college students as a way of getting helping hands on farms that need them?
Yeah, I love that. Like, I think we've talked a little bit about that. The 2 opportunities, I haven't got the AmeriCorps thing running, but it's a big idea. I think they have the organization to do it. With Mad Agriculture, personally, our organization has a master's level class through Colorado University in Boulder. And so it's a competitive position, but this year we have 6 fellows that are working kind of in a different lane, but they interweave with our staff to try to better understand heritage markets and how to do some seed cleaning and actually try to understand the true cost of raising heritage wheat here in Colorado. And so that's something our org is doing. But yeah, high school students, that, the classic FFA program was always there. I think that one needs reimagined. I think they're doing a little better. For my time at the NRCS, we would do soil judging with them and land planning, but the language was pretty stale in that, and it was pretty archaic to just some of the things that we've kind of moved beyond and understanding soil biology and some of those types of things that they weren't kind of up to speed on. So that was kind of the old model, was to participate in your FFA. It needs, again, reimagined and reinvented, I think. But so.
Mary is asking if you are able to share any business plans, if you could get permission, moving and identifying details, if that's possible.
Yeah, I think we could certainly, share like what we're looking for, like in the plan, like just delete out the lines and say, here's the, the revenue, here's your debt service, here's your enterprises, here's your expenses, and how you look at that, and understanding what your land lease is and what your position is versus if you're trying to purchase. Right now, land is going for like $25,000 an acre here. Like if you wanted to buy enough land to be able to support yourself farming, other than any other enterprise besides like a market garden, you would be upside down for the rest of your life. So we're really out of balance with trying to understand land. Up in Minnesota, it's going for up to $450 an acre to rent organic land or certified land. Back where I'm from, it's still about $250 an acre. So it's just really understanding what your debt service is, and then understanding your depreciations, what your overheads are, how you're going to compensate for labor and life insurance and all that stuff, and then what the marketplace is actually going to provide to you as far as a premium. And if you're going D2C or trying to vertically integrate, how far up that chain do you have to go to still capture as many pennies on the dollar? So we have charts that we work through and pivot tables and whatnot. So maybe we could do either like a follow-up webinar on that. It's kind of a big subject. Like I said, we have a whole capital team, and then within stewardship, we do land planning and business planning. So yeah, we do have some resources. So yeah, maybe just a personal email. You could reach out to me and I can follow up with that one.
We can also grab maybe some whatever you would want to share with us, Clark, and then we can send it out to the group.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'll do that way.
Cool. Okay, we've got a few more minutes. Ruth says she belongs to a local long-term organic CSA that has experimented a bit with permaculture, but is having trouble with staffing, etc. She'd like to help them move towards regenerative agriculture, but agree that the models you were talking about seems to be the issue. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I've been on market gardens that are regenerative, and there's like, if you follow social media, there's no-till market garden pages all over the country doing amazing things. The Front Range has tried to like say this or that about it, and I just feel like the risk, they need a little bit of a cushion or net, so to speak, so they can spend half of a season or half of a field into some of these trials. But I worked with a man named Miner Morgan. He was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is hotter and drier than Boulder or Longmont, Colorado. And he was farming regeneratively in a market garden. It was the most beautiful garden I had ever been to. He had it all three-dimensional. And so for 3 years, he would grow a crop both horizontally and vertically. And then in between that, he had his row spacings where he would grow cover crops. And then on the 4th year, he would move the cover crops into the production row. And then and the other rows that he had taken from for 3 years, he would move those into cover crops. And he could work his row spacings with a flail mower or a mower. And then a few times he could use, landscape fabric, which I'm not a huge fan of because it just mess everywhere, but he would roll it up at the end of the season, and he could use that for like 3 to 5 years. But his farm with bees and pollinators and like the whole thing was growing phenomenally, fruit trees and whatnot. So it can be done. It's just, how do you survive as a business as you're learning some of these radical, like I say, human creativity ideas? And that's where I think whether it's federal government or Restore Colorado or local sustainability tax like we have in Boulder County, or there's a huge conservation district in Weld County, Colorado that has millions of dollars trying to get that money back to the farmers so they can actually start pushing some of these ideas forward.
Great. Does anybody else have any? It looks like we're at the end of the questions for now. Can I just ask you a quick question? It might be kind of hard, but what is your favorite farm that you've worked on?
No, that's a really fair question. Working on is, maybe I'll loosely interpret that. So this summer we went and met a farmer named Rahi, and he's presented at Quivera, and of course has a last name. Character flaw of mine is I'm not very good with last names, but his first name is Rahi. He was from Guatemala. He had left, and he was raising these different type of nut trees, and then had broilers and laying hens underneath them, and was going to try to scale it from 15 acres to 90 acres. And everyone that worked through them had to be part of their cooperative. And then the chickens were like scratching and eating seed that was just barely germinating, like almost like fodder out in the field. And it was an amazing place. And so Rahi, we've worked with a little bit. I have been to Rick Clark's farm. He says he's the largest organic no-till farmer in Indiana. That was pretty neat. The West Bijou Ranch, which is a bison ranch in Colorado, is a beautiful place to spend time. I've camped there for a week and learned about their systems and helped them, do some ecological outcome verification, measuring their soils and grasses to make sure that they're moving in the right track, which was a piece of that data that was brought up earlier in the call. Those are some of my favorite places. I have been to a few places in Costa Rica. And then I spent a whole couple of months with my wife in Mongolia on those rangelands. And so watching how they herd and herding with the horses and move the different livestock was pretty amazing to see that being done. But any farm that is, has a group of people that love what they're doing and they laugh while they work and they enjoy life, like those are all amazing places. And I just feel so privileged to have met, countless of those types of people and landscapes through my journey.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this. This was so informative and so great to hear somebody so passionate talk about it. So it's really great.
Yeah.
Is there anything else, Josie, before closing up, other than the
yes,
the
yeah.
poll?
So yeah, thank you so much. This has been so informative. If you have time, I put the link to a post-webinar poll just to kind of help us improve future webinars. So if y'all could just fill that out. I think that's it for tonight, but thank you so much for coming out, and thank you, Clark.
Yeah.
This has been great.
Yeah, you're welcome. And they can just find me at Clark@MadAg. I didn't say that, but we're a pretty small team and it's a one-name email. So Clark@madagriculture.org. So just
Awesome.
go to the website or whatnot. So yeah, thanks, Jordan. Thanks, Josie. And I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope it was informative.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll also drop my email in the chat if anyone wants to reach out to me as well.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm gonna stop recording.
Take care.
Yep, bye.